Do you recall those African-American Christmas dishes nobody makes anymore? Back then, they once filled homes with the sweet aroma of spices, sugar, and the sounds of Sunday morning gospel, each bite carrying the warmth of family and tradition. When did those familiar flavors begin to slip away from our holiday tables? Sweet potato pone was more than just a dessert. It was a link to the past, somewhere between cake and memory. Grated sweet potatoes blended with molasses, brown sugar, and a touch of nutmeg, creating a warm, fragrant haze in the kitchen. It baked slowly, with the edges turning a rich brown, while the center stayed soft enough to slice, yet firm enough to hold together. Families often called it pudding, though it felt more like a song, a hymn of sweetness, golden and full of Southern charm. At Christmas, sweet potato pone graced tables from Virginia to Mississippi, usually baked in cast-iron skillets, slick with butter. It was sweet without being extravagant, rich but never overwhelming. A good pone carried the scent of wood smoke and spices, the rhythm of hands, stirring without a recipe, and the wisdom of generations passed down through cooking. The molasses added a dark depth, while the sweet potatoes brought a soul-warming sweetness, and together they created something entirely unique, something that tasted like home. Some people topped it with a dollop of cream. Others ate it plain, letting its natural sweetness speak for itself. Long after the pans had cooled, the smell still lingered in the air, thick with the nostalgia of holiday gatherings. Though it's been forgotten in many kitchens today, sweet potato pone once stood as a testament to how simple ingredients, when prepared with love, could become something extraordinary. Molasses pull candy was a holiday tradition that turned every kitchen into a place of laughter and shared memories. Dark molasses was slowly boiled with sugar and butter, bubbling and hissing like a small storm before transforming into a glossy, thick syrup. Children eagerly watched, waiting for the moment it was cool enough to touch, but warm enough to stretch. With buttered hands, they pulled and twisted the sticky candy into long ropes, the air sweet with anticipation. The molasses darkened to a rich golden hue as the air worked its magic on the candy, changing it from deep brown to amber. The transformation felt like something mystical, a moment of wonder that only the slow patience of holiday cooking could bring. Wrapped in wax paper and stored in tins, it became a gift of pure love. No frills, no fancy packaging, just time and sweetness wrapped up in a moment of togetherness. There were burnt fingers, drops on the floor, and laughter, but no one minded. The joy was in the making, not in perfection. When the jar was full, it was a sign that Christmas had truly arrived. These days, candy comes pre-packaged, and gifts are often bought rather than made. But back then, joy was handmade, and the taste of molasses and love was all that mattered. Hog's Head cheese, the dish born from the hard work of winter's hog killing, was a testament to using everything with respect. The pig, from cheek to snout, was boiled down into a rich, gelatinous broth, seasoned with pepper, vinegar, and cloves, and pressed into pans to set. When sliced cold, it glistened like glass, firm and savory, a proud symbol of resourcefulness. For black families in the South, Hog's Head cheese was not a delicacy. It was a necessity, a dish born out of survival and turned into a beloved tradition. Every bite carried the story of resilience, of making do with what was available and turning it into something worth savoring. The smell of it filled smokehouses and kitchens where nothing ever went to waste. It was served on crackers, cornbread, or with a dollop of mustard, though for some, plain was best. Children might have turned up their noses, but the elders knew its worth and its place in history. It was labor transformed into nourishment, history preserved in jelly and spice. Today, Hog's Head cheese is mostly a memory, but it once stood as a reminder that even the humblest scraps, when treated with care, could become feasts fit for kings. Baked ham with cloves and pineapple rings was more than just a dish. It was a symbol of celebration and tradition. The centerpiece of countless 1970s Christmas tables, it gleamed under layers of brown sugar glaze, its sweet, smoky aroma filling the house and stirring the promise of the holiday. The ham was studded with whole cloves, each punctuating the rich, tender meat, while golden pineapple rings with cherries in their centers crowned the roast. Every slice, every bite was steeped in nostalgia. The ham wasn't just for the holiday feast, it carried over into the days that followed, sliced thin for sandwiches or thick for dinner, served alongside greens, macaroni, or cornbread. It wasn't simply a meal, it was a performance, an act of love and pride. Mothers polished Pyrex dishes, fathers carved with ceremony, each slice reflecting the care and attention put into the preparation. The combination of sweet fruit and salty meat made every bite feel both familiar and indulgent. Today, spiral hams may take its place, but they can't replicate the memory of that golden roast, shimmering in the candlelight as the centerpiece of holiday celebration. It was more than just food, it was a symbol of making the most of what you had and turning it into something joyful, something extraordinary. Ambrosia salad was like a burst of sunshine in the middle of winter. Its vibrant colors, layers of citrus, coconut, cherries, and whipped topping, brightened holiday tables and hearts alike. Cool, sweet, and refreshing, it didn't need an oven, just love and a good glass bowl to bring it to life. Each spoonful was a mixture of tang and cream, a small taste of summer in the midst of December. For many Black families in the South, ambrosia represented abundance. It was proof that celebration could bloom even when times were hard. Children always reached for the cherries first, while the elders smiled, reminiscing about who first brought the recipe. No two ambrosias were ever the same. Some added pineapple, others marshmallows, but all carried the same joy. It sat proudly beside hams and pies, cheerful and bright, like a promise that sweetness, much like love, didn't come from wealth, but from care and effort. Today, ambrosia is a rarity at the holiday table, but back then, it was as common as laughter. It was the sweet pause between stories, the dish that reminded everyone that beauty didn't come from money, but from love, care, and tradition. Cornbread dressing with giblets was the heart and soul of Southern Christmas celebrations. Rich, smoky, and deeply seasoned, it carried the flavor of patience, memory, and love. Cornbread was crumbled into a savory broth made from giblets, onions, celery, and sage, transforming into a dish that was golden on top and tender below. It wasn't just stuffing, it was a Sunday dinner, elevated to sacred. Every family had their own version. Some added boiled eggs, others sausage, and occasionally oysters. The flavors lingered long after the meal, heavy with spice, comfort, and tradition. Cornbread dressing with giblets wasn't just a side, it was a bridge to the generations before, to mothers and grandmothers who stirred the same pot, passing down not just recipes, but a piece of family history. The smell of it alone, earthy, herbed, and warm, was a sure sign that Christmas was near. It filled the house with stories told between bites, laughter ringing through the steam. You could taste every hour of care in each serving, every prayer whispered into the pan, making it more than just food. It was home, it was belonging, served up in every spoonful. Oyster stew on Christmas Eve was a quiet, soulful tradition, a pause that spoke more in its silence than in words. Along the coastal regions from the Carolinas to Maryland, families gathered around pots of oysters, cream, butter, and just the right seasonings, simmering gently. The pale gold broth, rich but never heavy, carried the faintest taste of salt and smoke, a reminder of the sea's embrace. It was the kind of meal you ate slowly, in peaceful silence or soft conversation, each spoonful feeling like an old familiar comfort. For many African American families, this stew was a moment of stillness before the holiday's busier joys. It was a time to reflect, to give thanks, and to welcome in the Christmas spirit with simplicity. The oysters, freshly caught and full of the ocean's essence, seemed to bring the sea's whispers into the warmth of the home. Served alongside crackers or cornbread, the dish was not elaborate, but humble and pure. It didn't need a dessert to follow, only warmth, flavor, and a quiet kind of peace. Though oyster stew has faded from many tables today, its memory still lingers. In the coastal air, a reminder that Christmas can be just as rich in quiet moments as in grand celebrations. Red velvet cake with its thick cooked frosting was an iconic labor of love long before the days of boxed mixes. In those days, the vibrant red color came from earthy beets, giving the cake its deep hue. The batter, soft and velvety, was paired with a custard-like frosting that was cooked over the stove until smooth, rich, and glossy. The result was a cake that was more than just dessert. It was an experience. At Christmas, red velvet cake stood proudly as the star of the holiday table, often carried to church socials or shared with family. It wasn't baked quickly. Instead, it was wrapped in wax paper, letting the flavors deepen with time. Each slice, glowing red against the white, held more than just sweetness. It carried pride, tradition, and the careful work of the hands that made it. The first bite always evoked a smile, the taste subtle, yet satisfying, a bit like hearing a favorite tune softly in the background. In today's world, few make red velvet cake this way, but for those who do, it's not just cake. It's a family heirloom, a history carried on in every bite. It's a tangible reminder of how love, patience, and care transform simple ingredients into something that lasts. Candied yams with their dark, crisp sugar crust were the kind of dish that commanded attention from the moment they were placed on the table. The thick slices of yam, smothered in butter and brown sugar, caramelized into a glossy, dark finish. The aroma alone could make everyone in the house gather around, drawn in by its warm, inviting scent. Each bite balanced the softness of the yam with the deep, smoky sweetness of the caramelized sugar, melting effortlessly into the mouth. This dish wasn't just a treat, it was a tradition. Families carefully layered the yams, making sure the syrup reached every corner, sometimes adding hints of nutmeg or orange zest. It was often the first dish to be devoured, its sweetness connecting everyone around the table. There was no need for a formal dessert to follow. Candied yams were the sweet crown of the holiday meal. When the spoon cracked the crispy top, it was a familiar sound, comforting, warm, and full of the essence of home. Peach cobbler with biscuit crust was a dessert that announced itself long before it hit the table. The scent of peaches, bubbling with sugar and butter, filled the house, inviting everyone in with its sweet fragrance. Mamas would drop dollops of biscuit dough onto the fruit, never too neat, always just right. As the cobbler baked, the golden crust would form, crackling slightly as it rose to reveal a sweet, sticky syrup beneath. When served hot, fresh from the oven, the first spoonful hissed as it cut through the crispy crust and soft fruit. A scoop of vanilla ice cream on top was never turned down, but the cobbler needed no adornment. It was perfect as it was. This dessert wasn't just for satisfying a sweet tooth. It was a celebration of simple joys, a perfect blend of warmth, sweetness, and comfort. Even in the middle of winter, peach cobbler carried the essence of summer with every bite. It was messy, sticky, and so perfectly right. It wasn't about perfection, it was about the feeling it gave. Each bite lingered, leaving a taste of gratitude that stretched beyond the food, a reminder that joy is found in the simplest things shared around the table. Smothered pork chops with onion gravy were the kind of meal that felt like a promise fulfilled on a cold winter night. Thick, juicy pork chops were seared to golden perfection, then slow-cooked in a rich broth made from caramelized onions. As the meat simmered, it softened into tenderness, and the gravy thickened into a velvety sauce that clung to every bite. The smell of it filled small kitchens, weaving its way through the rooms, wrapping the family in warmth. Served with a side of rice, collard greens, or cornbread, It was a dish that made any meal feel special, whether it was a Sunday gathering or a Christmas feast. The onions, slowly cooked until they melted into sweetness, gave the gravy its depth. Every spoonful of that thick, silky gravy carried the taste of patience and care. Food made slowly with love. When the world outside seemed harsh and uncertain, this was the meal that reminded everyone there was still warmth, still comfort to be found, gathered around a table. The pork chops weren't dressed up or fancy, but they didn't need to be. Their simplicity was proof that the most meaningful things in life, like love, could simmer and strengthen over time, turning into something greater than gold. Pineapple upside-down cake was the kind of dessert that brightened up the table the moment it arrived. Mama would start by melting butter and brown sugar in a skillet, letting it bubble just enough before carefully placing perfectly round pineapple rings in the pan. Each ring was crowned with a cherry, the color so deep it almost glowed. The thick, sweet batter was poured on top, sealing the fruit beneath a sugary glaze that would caramelize as it baked. The result was a dessert that was both simple and grand, with the fruit creating a rich contrast to the soft cake beneath. When it was flipped onto the plate, everyone would hold their breath, watching in anticipation as the golden, glistening cake settled into place. The cake was airy, the pineapple sticky and sweet, a perfect marriage of flavors, tart and rich, all at once. Served warm with a dollop of cream on top, it was an instant showstopper. But it wasn't just about how it looked or tasted, it was the pride of the person who made it, the love poured into every step. Pineapple upside-down cake wasn't just a dessert, it was an event in itself. The first slice would bring applause, and the last quiet sighs of satisfaction. It was the dish that made every Sunday feel like something extra special, a reminder that beauty can rise from the simplest of ingredients. Jellied cranberry mold was as much a work of art as it was a dish. It gleamed under the lights, a ruby-red ring of tart sweetness that looked almost too perfect to eat. Made from canned cranberries, gelatin, and orange zest, it sat at the center of holiday tables like a jewel. The way it wobbled gently when sliced added to its charm. The dish didn't just fill a space on the table, it elevated the whole meal. It was a refreshing contrast to the heavier meats and gravies, its bright flavor cutting through the richness, offering a moment of lightness. In the mid-20th century, housewives treated jellied cranberry mold like an art form. Copper molds shaped like wreaths, stars, or even simple circles were carefully filled and chilled until the dish held its form perfectly. Each slice was glossy, proud, and always served with care. Children delighted in watching it wobble on their plates, while adults marveled at how it dressed up the table. There was a sense of pride in each mold, a sense of tradition that made it a holiday essential. Today, jellied cranberry mold may be a forgotten memory, but it once stood as a symbol of that time when even a humble dish could be elevated with love, patience, and a little flair. It wasn't just about the taste, it was the joy in the making, the artistry, and the pride in sharing something beautiful with those you loved. Coconut layer cake was more than just dessert. It was the crowning jewel of a Sunday meal, standing tall and proud with frosting as white as a freshly pressed tablecloth. Mama would crack open coconuts by hand, carefully collecting every drop of milk, shredding the meat with the kind of patience that only love could inspire. The layers were soft and buttery, each one stacked just right, and covered with fluffy, sweet icing that clung to the cake like snow on a winter morning. Each bite of the cake brought a tender sweetness, rich yet never overwhelming, with the subtle crunch of fresh coconut that caught the light in the most delicate way. It wasn't just a cake, it was made for moments of celebration, Easter, family reunions, or when special guests arrived. With every bite, you could taste the love and care put into it, the kind of cake that took hours to prepare but was always worth every minute spent. Children eagerly stood by the counter, hoping for stray coconut flakes to fall, while the adults admired the cake like a work of art. It was the kind of dessert that quieted the table, not out of silence, but out of sheer awe. Coconut layer cake wasn't just food, it was a tradition, a symbol of joy and togetherness wrapped in white. Even days after the cake was made, the leftovers stayed moist, the frosting soft and velvety. A simple slice could turn any Sunday into a special occasion, a reminder that even the simplest ingredients, just butter, sugar, and love, could make something so beautiful and so deeply meaningful. Hoppin' John, with its rice and black-eyed peas, was much more than just a meal. It was a message passed down through generations. Prepared during the holidays like Christmas and New Year's, it symbolized good fortune, prosperity, and the hope for better days. The aroma of black-eyed peas simmered with rice, onions, and smoked meat, filling the house with comfort and a deep sense of heritage. Every spoonful connected African traditions to Southern soil, where generations of cooks had turned simple survival food into a deeply sacred dish. While collard greens often shared the plate and cornbread sat beside it, Hoppin' John was the centerpiece, holding within it a story. The peas represented coins, the rice was a symbol of abundance, and the pork added the strength needed to face the year ahead. Families would gather around steaming bowls, quietly stirring, offering prayers, and giving thanks. Some added peppers for heat, others a splash of vinegar to brighten the flavor, but every version was cooked with patience and reverence, just as tradition had dictated. When the meal was finished, the leftovers often became Skippin' Jenny, a reminder to be humble, resourceful, and grateful. Over time, the ritual of making Skippin' Jenny faded from many homes, but the memory of it lives on in kitchens that remember. It was more than just food. It was a dish filled with meaning, with faith, and with the essence of hope in every grain of rice and each simmering hour. It was a belief made edible, a tangible representation of the strength and perseverance passed down through the years. Pecan pralines were little miracles made of sugar, cream, and patience. Mama stood by the stove, stirring a perfect mixture of sugar, butter, and cream, watching the transformation happen right before her eyes. The trick was knowing exactly when the candy had reached the right consistency. 1 second too soon, and they stayed soft and gooey. 1 second too late, and they turned into hard, brittle candies. Timing was key, and with years of practice, she always knew when to stop. When the mixture was just right, she would spoon it onto wax paper, with the pecans glistening under their sugary coat. The kitchen filled with the warm aroma of toasted nuts and caramelized sweetness, the scent of something comforting and special. Children gathered around, eager to steal a piece when they cooled enough to handle, waiting for the crisp crunch and creamy inside. Each praline was a perfect balance of crispy on the outside, creamy on the inside, and sweet with a hint of salt. Pecan pralines weren't just for Christmas. They made an appearance on Sunday afternoons after church, or just as a simple treat, no special occasion needed. They were rewards for good behavior, tokens of love, and little bites of home. The first taste melted slowly on the tongue, leaving behind a warmth and sweetness that made everything feel right. Every batch was a small gamble, an act of care and precision that felt like a triumph when done right. The process was hard, but the joy was easy. In one small piece of candy, you could taste every sweet thing about home, wrapped in sugar and memory. Collard greens with smoked neck bones were a dish that turned time into flavor. They simmered for hours, filling homes with a deep, steady scent that wrapped itself around every memory. The greens softened slowly, turning a darker green as they soaked in the rich, smoky flavor from the neck bones. It wasn't a dish you rushed, it was a labor of love, requiring patience and time to let the flavors develop. The pot lid would rattle, the broth would thicken, and the kitchen would warm up, even if the winter winds howled outside. In many homes, The first taste wasn't eaten by anyone at the table. It was offered up in quiet thanks. The broth, known as pot liquor, was sacred. Sipped up with cornbread, every drop was cherished until the pot was empty. Families might add a dash of hot sauce or pepper flakes or maybe a pinch of sugar to balance the flavor, but the heart of the dish, the deep, rich pot liquor, remained unchanged. Collard greens with smoked neck bones were more than a side dish. They spoke of survival and gratitude. They were a reminder of the ability to make something beautiful out of what the world overlooked. Each spoonful carried stories that were older than the table itself. Forgotten by fast meals and new diets, this dish is one of the truest expressions of home. When the pot boiled low and the aroma filled the air, heavy with comfort, you knew that Christmas had arrived. Coconut custard pie was the taste of coastal celebration, rich and sweet with the scent of the sea. Made with fresh or canned grated coconut mixed into eggs, milk, and sugar, it baked into a creamy custard that shimmered beneath a lightly toasted top. Every bite was like a slice of sunshine, smooth and lush with hints of vanilla and the sea's salty air. For many black families along the Carolinas and Gulf Coast, coconut custard pie was a beloved dessert that marked special occasions, homecomings, fish fries, and Sunday gatherings. It wasn't just a treat, it was a piece of home, a reminder of time spent laughing and sharing with loved ones. The pie was both indulgent and nostalgic, turning an ordinary day into something worth celebrating. It traveled well, sat beautifully on the table, and lasted just long enough for everyone to enjoy a slice. Coconut custard pie wasn't just about the ingredients. It was about hospitality, about sharing something that brought people together. It was proof that joy could be baked and that comfort could be found in the warmth of a pie that never truly lost its golden glow. Generous, inviting, and always full of love, it left behind the kind of warmth that stayed with you long after the last bite was taken. Sweet potato pie with brown sugar meringue was the dessert that crowned holiday tables with a beauty and flavor all its own. The creamy sweetness of mashed sweet potatoes spiced with nutmeg, cinnamon, and a hint of vanilla filled a flaky golden crust. It was a masterpiece of simplicity, yet it tasted as rich as any custard. But the real star was the meringue, whipped to perfection with brown sugar until soft caramelized peaks formed and lightly browned in the oven. It was the finishing touch that made the pie as beautiful as it was delicious. Families would save the first slice for honored guests or the eldest members of the family as a symbol of respect and affection. The pie held the essence of the southern soil it came from and reflected the love and skill of generations who knew how to turn humble ingredients into a celebration. Children eagerly licked the mixing bowls clean while parents watched the meringue rise, all of them sharing in the quiet anticipation before the feast. As time passed and convenience took over, commercial pies and instant mixes took away the heart of the tradition. But for those who remember the warm scent of that brown sugar meringue and the joy it brought, sweet potato pie will always be more than just a dessert. It's a memory, a symbol of family love and the patience of hands that crafted beauty from scratch. Vinegar pie was the unexpected treat that always left guests curious until they tasted it. Born out of necessity during times when fresh lemons were scarce, it used the simplest ingredients, sugar, butter, eggs, and just a spoonful of vinegar, which gave the custard a surprising tartness that balanced the sweetness. The first bite was a revelation, silky and tangy, light as air. What made vinegar pie a favorite wasn't its ingredients, but the heart behind it. It served as a reminder that even in hard times, there was a way to make something special with what you had. It was a dessert born from resilience, simple in execution, but profound in its ability to transform modest ingredients into something that felt extraordinary. The smell, faintly buttery and sweet, lingered long after the meal ended. the flavor echoing a quiet defiance against the hardships life had thrown its way. Vinegar pie was more than just a dish, it was a lesson in making do and making magic, even when the cupboard was bare. Rum fruit punch was the drink that lit up every Christmas gathering. It was vibrant, bold, and full of warmth, both in flavor and in spirit. Pineapple juice, orange slices, and dark rum mixed together in a shimmering bowl, the ice wreaths floating on top. It was more than just a drink, it was an experience, a taste of sunshine in the middle of winter. The punch was sweet, tropical, and just strong enough to make even the quietest uncles laugh and share a story or two. Aunties ladled it out with practiced hands, warning the children to stick to ginger ale, while the grown-ups savored the warmth of the rum punch. Each sip felt like a moment of joy, something to savor slowly as the night unfolded. The flavor balanced sweetness with spice, a true reflection of the Southern hospitality that everyone had come to expect. Every glass carried a piece of history, blending West Indian roots with Southern tradition, a marriage of cultures that felt like home. The last sip was always the best, where the fruit had soaked up all the flavors, tasting like everything and nothing all at once. Rum fruit punch wasn't just a drink, it was a symbol of togetherness, a way to make the evening linger just a little longer, and to toast to those who came before, and those who would carry the legacy forward. Banana pudding with vanilla wafers was the crown jewel of any Sunday dessert spread, a perfect combination of sweet, creamy, and comforting. Mama would line the pan with golden vanilla wafers, layering them with rich, thick vanilla custard and perfectly ripe bananas that seemed to melt on contact. Each layer was built with care, patience, and love until the dish was set in the fridge to firm up, just enough so that when the spoon finally dug in, it gave way with a soft sigh of surrender. Everyone had their own favorite part of banana pudding, the corner pieces, where the wafers softened into sweet, gooey perfection, or the first scoop, which always went to the elders. No one ever rushed banana pudding. It was a dessert that needed time, just like love. It wasn't a dish to be hurried, but rather one to savor and enjoy. Families would gather around the table, each person eagerly awaiting their turn. It was more than just dessert, it was tradition. It was a reminder that the simple things, done well, could bring the greatest joy. A spoonful of banana pudding was like a little piece of home, familiar, comforting, and full of the warmth that only family could provide. Even when the last spoonful was scraped from the bowl, it was still the best bite, full of memories, laughter, and the comforting feeling of belonging. It was a dessert that turned an ordinary day into something extraordinary. Each of these dishes carries a story, a memory, and a tradition that has passed through generations. They are not just food, they are the heart of family, celebration, and survival, each bite a testament to the love and effort put into every dish. Buttermilk pound cake was the kind of dessert that called everyone home. The aroma itself was like an invitation, pulling children from their games and grown men from their afternoon naps. Dense and buttery, it baked to a perfect golden brown in a bundt pan, its crust just crisp enough to break into delicate flakes when you touched it. Mama would pour the batter into the pan with care, her humming filling the kitchen as she scraped every last bit from the bowl, her hands moving with practiced rhythm. By the time it was finished, the whole house smelled like comfort, a scent so inviting you could almost taste it. The cake, firm yet tender, stayed moist inside, soft and rich, melting effortlessly on the tongue like a cherished memory. It was sliced thin for guests, thick for family, and always served with a smile. Whether it was Sunday supper, a homecoming, or a surprise visit from a neighbor, buttermilk pound cake was always there, waiting to be shared. The sweetness of the cake was steady, never too bold, and that's what made it unforgettable. This cake wasn't about fancy frosting or extravagant decoration. It was about the simple ingredients from the pantry, transformed into something special. With every slice, you tasted the love, the care, and the patience it took to make. There was no need for icing when the warmth of home filled every corner of the room. Long after the plates were cleared and the kitchen was quiet again, the memory of the cake smell lingered, a comforting reminder that no matter where you went, you could always come home to something good. Buttermilk pound cake was more than just a dessert. It was a promise that home would always be warm and love would always be waiting. Chitterlings and eggs were the taste of Sunday mornings, the kind that slowed time and filled the house with the deep, soulful scent of patience and pride. The chitterlings, cleaned meticulously and scrubbed again and again, were seasoned with salt, pepper, and onions before being carefully fried in the skillet. They sizzled slowly, their aroma mingling with the faint, earthy scent of the onions, telling everyone that it was a day worth savoring. When the eggs hit the pan, they soaked up the flavors left behind, scrambled until they were perfectly tender and golden, ready to be served alongside the chitterlings. Together, the dish became more than just a meal. It became an experience. Rich, bold, and unforgettable, chitterlings and eggs were a breakfast that felt like a celebration, not just a morning routine. It was a dish born from necessity, from making the most out of what others overlooked and turning it into something worthy of gathering around. The flavor, deep and earthy, carried the weight of generations, a taste of history that lingered with every bite. Coffee brewed in the corner, laughter and stories filled the air, and the soft hum of music from a nearby radio added to the comfort of the moment. Chitterlings and eggs weren't for every Sunday. They were for the days that held meaning, for the mornings when family gathered close and time slowed down just enough to savor what was in front of you. Each plate told a story, not just of food, but of survival, resilience, and community. It was a dish passed down through the years, one that turned scraps into sustenance and everyday moments into something sacred. Every bite was a reminder of how food could carry history, family, and love all in one. Baked chicken drumsticks with barbecue sauce were a Sunday treat, though it wasn't always Sunday when they appeared. Those big family packs made it possible to feed everyone without breaking the bank, and that was part of the magic. You'd season the chicken with salt, pepper, and sometimes a little sugar too. Help the sauce stick just right. Then the drumsticks would go into the oven, the smell slowly wrapping itself around the house, drawing everyone in. As the chicken baked, the sauce would bubble up and darken, thickening like molasses and dripping down into the pan. The result? Sticky, sweet, smoky perfection. You could eat them with white bread or a plate of plain rice, and somehow it felt like more than enough. It didn't need to be fancy or complicated. It was all about flavor, love, and time. You'd lick your fingers clean and go back for seconds, even if you promised yourself you were full. That's what made it special. It was proof that you didn't need a big budget to create something that felt like a celebration. A little heat, the right sauce, and time were all it took to make a meal that everyone looked forward to. It didn't have to be extravagant, just made with care and shared with those you loved. Lemon icebox pie was the perfect cool down after a Sunday meal. Refreshing and uplifting all at once, it was a dessert that came together effortlessly. Just condensed milk, eggs, lemon juice, and a graham cracker crust pressed by hand. Mama mixed it until smooth, poured it into the pan, and let the fridge work its magic. No baking, no rushing, just patience and a chill attitude. By the time the pie set firm overnight, it was ready to slice clean, gleaming under the light like sunshine on a plate. Tart enough to wake you up, but sweet enough to keep you coming back for more. It was the perfect balance between sharp and smooth, bright and creamy. Folks would sneak spoonfuls from the fridge before dinner, claiming to just taste it, but everyone knew better. Lemon icebox pie wasn't just a dessert, it was a reward for surviving another week. It was a brief pause between the rush of life and the peace of resting. Its flavor lingered long after the last bite. That citrus tang reminded everyone that sometimes the best joys were simple ones. A pie, a quiet moment, and the people you share it with. Cool, creamy, and endlessly comforting, it was the essence of a peaceful Sunday in every slice. Brown sugar-glazed carrots were a simple side dish, yet they carried so much heart and warmth to the Christmas table. Sliced thick and simmered in butter, brown sugar, and just a hint of cinnamon, they gleamed like little jewels under the soft glow of the holiday lights. The glaze clung to each piece, turning sweet and sticky, caramelizing to the perfect point of tenderness. They balanced out the heaviness of the meats and casseroles, adding a brightness that was so often needed at the table. Children who swore they didn't like vegetables were always the first to ask for seconds. The smell of sugar and spice would fill the kitchen as mothers carefully stirred, knowing the exact moment to stop before the syrup thickened too much. It was simple food, but the kind that made you feel special. A reminder that even the most humble ingredients, when cooked with love, could shine. While often overlooked now, brown sugar-glazed carrots used to stand proudly alongside the main dishes of the meal, humble but unforgettable. By the time the last spoonful disappeared, the pan would be left with a glaze so delicious that someone would always scrape it clean. They proved that sweetness and care could elevate even the simplest food into a memory worth cherishing. Stewed okra and tomatoes were a dish that transformed humble garden produce into a comforting, hearty meal. Okra, with its African roots, thrived in the rich southern soil, while tomatoes, easy to grow in any backyard, came together with onions, spices, and sometimes a bit of salt pork to create a thick, savory stew. The combination was both tangy and savory, with a texture that invited second helpings. Families cherished this dish because it stretched modest harvests into filling meals, often served over rice or with a side of cornbread to make it even more satisfying. It was especially vital during times when meat was scarce and too costly for many households. Stewed okra and tomatoes weren't just food, they were a way of making the most of what the land provided, a testament to the resourcefulness that shaped generations. The taste of stewed okra and tomatoes carried memories of summer gardens, long hours spent weeding and tending to crops, and the quiet satisfaction of a meal that nourished body and soul. It was frugal, it was flavorful, and it was proof that even the simplest ingredients could create something extraordinary when cooked with care. Wild grape must was the flavor that tied plantation kitchens to the natural abundance of the South. Muscadine and scuppernong grapes, untended but plentiful, grew along fences and in wooded areas, producing a dependable late summer harvest. Enslaved workers would gather the grapes, crushing them by hand to make a tangy juice that could be fermented into a refreshing drink or boiled into a syrupy must used to season grains, greens, and meats. The method was rooted in West African traditions of reducing fruit into flavorful, brightened sauces and drinks. After emancipation, muscadine wine and homemade grape jellies became cherished staples in Southern homes, a continuation of African American foodways. The slow simmering and careful gathering required patience, a skill passed down through generations and born of necessity. Wild grape must remains a symbol of how African American cooks blended Old World techniques with New World ingredients, creating a unique and lasting flavor. It's a living testament to the ingenuity and perseverance that still influences regional preserves and beverages in the Carolinas and Georgia today. Cowpea and collard stew combine two of the most enduring ingredients in Southern kitchens, nourishing families through hardship and triumph alike. Field peas, also known as cowpeas, were simmered slowly with smoky meat and paired with hearty collard greens, creating a rich, flavorful stew packed with protein, vitamins, and earthy goodness. The long cooking time filled the house with an aroma that invited everyone to the table, signaling warmth and comfort. Cowpeas thrived in poor soil, making them a reliable crop when times were tough, while collards, tough and resilient, continued to grow well after other vegetables had withered. Together, they formed a dish that was both cost-effective and sustaining, reflecting a tradition of resourcefulness passed down through generations. Each pot of stew was seasoned with a blend of onions, garlic, and pepper, with every cook adding their personal touch, rooted in family tradition. Families would gather around the table, cornbread in hand, soaking up the flavorful broth and finding strength in every spoonful. Though times have changed and the modern supermarket offers convenience, cowpea and collard stew remains a reminder of a time when simple, humble ingredients brought families together. It was a dish born out of necessity, but served with love, showing that nourishment and strength could come from the most basic of foods, prepared with patience and care. Sorghum syrup biscuits with milk were the kind of meal that brought warmth and sweetness to the table, even in the toughest times. Sorghum syrup, often more affordable than sugar, was a staple in many homes, stored in jars that seemed to stretch through the months. When served over freshly baked biscuits made with simple flour and lard, it turned a humble meal into something special. My grandmother would bake the biscuits, then split them open, pouring syrup generously over them and serving them with cold milk that always seemed to taste a little sweeter with every sip. It was a meal that felt like comfort and sustenance, filling the stomachs of hard-working men and growing children. The syrup transformed what was essentially just flour into something that felt like a treat, a reminder that even in times of struggle, there was joy to be found in the simplest things. In the 1960s, this dish served as a quiet reminder that comfort didn't always come from extravagant meals or expensive ingredients. It was a dish made from what was available, finding contentment in the modest, everyday acts of cooking. Sorghum syrup biscuits with milk were more than just food. They were a lesson in making do with what you had and finding sweetness where it was least expected. Homemade chow chow relish was another staple that added a burst of brightness to many southern tables. With its mix of cabbage, onions, peppers, and green tomatoes, all finely chopped and simmered in vinegar, mustard seed, and sugar, chow chow became the tangy companion to a plate heavy with beans, greens, or smoked meats. It was the kind of dish that each household made its own, with some preferring it sweeter, others leaning toward a spicier version. It was more than just a condiment, it was a family tradition passed down through the years. Chow chow was made in the late summer when neighbors would gather to chop vegetables together, exchanging stories while large pots bubbled over outdoor fires. The relish was then jarred and sealed, lining pantry shelves in neat rows, a reminder of the season's harvest that would last through the winter. Even though store-bought pickles and bottled sauces have since replaced the homemade relish, the memory of chow chow still lingers in kitchens where people recall the sound of knives on wooden boards and the bright, tangy flavor of a spoonful alongside a hearty meal. It was a connection to the land, to family, and to the seasons, preserved in a jar. Bay leaf infusion was another simple yet deeply comforting tradition that relied on the natural world around southern kitchens. Bay leaves, whether fresh or dried, were gathered from the native bay trees and steeped in hot water to create a soothing tea. This infusion, with its mild floral scent, wasn't just about warmth, it was a small act of care, believed to aid digestion and provide relief from colds. In many homes, it was a calming remedy, especially during hard days when comfort was needed most. The knowledge of bay leaves and their healing properties was passed down from both African herbal traditions and indigenous practices, blending over generations into a shared understanding of the land's quiet gifts. After emancipation, African American communities continued to brew bay tea for health and hospitality, infusing the southern air with its subtle fragrance. Even today, bay leaves are a hallmark of southern kitchens. their earthy aroma flavoring soups and stews. Bay leaf infusion serves as a gentle reminder that survival wasn't just about nourishment, it was also about care. It represents the strength that came from nature, from the land, and from the quiet acts of love and sustenance that kept families going. Pig ear sandwiches were a perfect example of how Black families turned what others overlooked into flavorful, satisfying meals. Pig ears, often sold for pennies by butchers, were boiled until tender, then sliced thin and served between slices of bread topped with mustard or hot sauce. The texture was chewy, but the taste was rich and savory, making it a surprisingly hearty meal. For many families, pig ear sandwiches were a dependable source of protein when more expensive meats were out of reach. They were particularly common in rural communities where hogs were butchered at home and every part of the animal was used. It wasn't just about saving money, it was about surviving with what was available, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Families knew that this kind of resourcefulness was essential, and eating pig ears became a proud act of resilience. These sandwiches weren't just a meal, they were a testament to strength. They proved that with ingenuity and care, even the humblest cuts could be transformed into something filling and satisfying. Today, pig ear sandwiches are remembered as a dish born out of necessity, but they also embody a sense of pride and resilience, showing that strength can be found in the simplest of meals. Burdock root stew is another example of the deep connection African cooks had to the land and their knowledge of using wild ingredients to feed their families. Burdock, with its earthy flavor reminiscent of artichoke, grew wild along fence rows and ditches where other crops struggled to thrive. The long, sturdy taproots were dug up with simple hand tools, cleaned, sliced, and simmered for hours in a pot, often with greens or herbs that were in season. The slow cooking process softened the burdock, creating a rich, hearty broth filled with minerals and sustenance. This practice was deeply rooted in African and indigenous traditions, using wild plants as essential sources of nourishment during lean times. After emancipation, burdock continued to appear in folk remedies and rural foraging guides, prized for its nutritional value and subtle sweetness. Today, herbalists and foragers still treasure burdock for its medicinal and nutritional benefits, reminding us that what was once a humble survival food has transformed into a symbol of resilience and resourcefulness. It's a connection to the natural world, a world that sustained families long before convenience foods became the norm. Hoghead cheese is a culinary triumph of resourcefulness, where every part of the hog was utilized to create a dish that was both practical and surprisingly elegant. After a hog was butchered, the head was simmered slowly with onions, herbs, and spices until the meat fell off the bones, infusing the broth with rich, savory flavors. The broth was then strained and allowed to cool, turning into a jelly that held tender bits of meat, seasoned with subtle spices. Served cold with crackers or bread, hoghead cheese became a delicacy at gatherings where it was more than just food. It was a celebration of making the most of what you had. Preparing it required patience, skill, and the shared techniques passed down from generation to generation. Children would watch the long, slow process with a mix of curiosity and admiration, learning that resourcefulness and creativity could turn what seemed like scraps into something delicious and revered. Today, few families still make hoghead cheese from scratch, and store-bought versions often lack the depth of flavor found in the homemade original. But the tradition lives on in the memories of those who remember its taste and the way it represented making the most of every part of the animal. Hoghead cheese stands as a testament to resilience, resourcefulness, and the deep respect African American cooks had for the gifts of the land and animals they worked with. Butter beans and rice were a meal born from necessity, but made with a love that could fill the house. The butter beans, tender and creamy, were slowly simmered until they absorbed the smoky richness of a ham hock or pork bone if one was available. The beans, tender and soft, soaked in the flavor, turning into a hearty broth that beautifully coated the rice. This dish, simple in its ingredients, could feed an entire family, stretching a few humble items into something nourishing and satisfying. My grandmother often used long grain rice, knowing that it would stretch the beans further, making the meal last longer and satisfy more bellies. The dish wasn't just about filling stomachs, it was about comfort. The soft texture of the beans, the deep flavor of the broth, and the warmth of the rice carried the weight of care, family, and tradition. Butter beans were cheap, but they were packed with protein and flavor, turning a basic meal into one that felt like a luxury when times were tight. Children grew up savoring this simple dish, learning its importance in feeding a family without wasting a single grain of rice or bean. It wasn't about extravagance, but practicality. In a kitchen where every penny counted, butter beans and rice were the epitome of resourcefulness. They proved that with patience and care, even the humblest ingredients could turn into a meal everyone looked forward to. Ground pumpkin seed porridge was another dish that showed how every part of the harvest could be used. After pumpkins were cooked for pies or stews, the seeds were cleaned, dried, and pounded into a coarse meal. The seeds, rich in healthy oils and proteins, were simmered slowly in water or thin milk, creating a creamy, nourishing porridge with a subtle nutty flavor. When sweetened with a bit of honey or molasses, it became a sustaining meal that was perfect for breakfast or as an evening dish. It was a comforting and simple way to use up what would otherwise go to waste. This method of using ground seeds to thicken soups and stews had deep roots in West African culinary traditions, and it found its way into American kitchens, enriching Southern foodways. It was more than just food, it was a reminder of a heritage that valued every part of the harvest. Generations later, pumpkin seed porridge is still remembered in some rural areas, valued for its nourishing qualities and gentle, soothing taste. Today, modern cooks may recognize the flavors in contemporary seed-based milks and cereals, showing that this centuries-old practice continues to influence how we eat. Pumpkin seed porridge is a testament to the wisdom of not wasting anything the land provides, and it celebrates a culture of resourcefulness that remains relevant today. Hog maw stew was one of those dishes that turned a part of the animal most people would throw away into something to be savored. The pig's stomach lining, carefully cleaned and stuffed with potatoes, onions, and spices, was then simmered slowly until tender and flavorful. The result was a meal that was hearty, filling, and richly seasoned, stretching small amounts of ingredients into something that could feed the entire family. When money was tight, hog maw stew allowed families to use every part of the animal, proving that nothing should ever be wasted. It was a dish that showed how ingenuity could turn something that seemed unappetizing into a comforting, satisfying meal. Hog maw stew was often prepared for large family gatherings where the goal was to make a little bit go a long way. It carried with it the spirit of community, reminding everyone of the importance of sharing and how a meal made with love could unite people, no matter how humble the ingredients. While hog maw stew may not have been a dish of luxury, it represented strength, resilience, and survival. It was a reflection of how, even in the hardest of times, a meal could offer comfort and warmth, showing that even the most overlooked parts of life could create something beautiful when handled with care. Hog maw stew was a quiet testament to a culture that valued nothing less than resourcefulness and family. Pokeweed greens were one of the first fresh tastes of spring, a welcome relief after the long months of winter when food supplies were scarce. As the young pokeweed shoots sprang up early and plentifully, they offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of hardship. But these greens came with a warning. They were naturally toxic and required careful boiling in several changes of water to make them safe to eat. It was a delicate process, one that enslaved cooks, drawing on African knowledge of wild plants, perfected over time. Through trial and wisdom, they turned pokeweed into a tender, spinach-like dish that was rich in vitamins, an invaluable source of nutrition when gardens were just beginning to show signs of life. Seasoned with salt pork or wild herbs gathered from the land, pokeweed greens became more than just food. They symbolized the arrival of the new season. The bitter taste of winter was replaced with the refreshing, vibrant flavor of spring, marking a new chapter for families who had endured the harsh months. In the years following emancipation, poke salad festivals blossomed in Appalachia and across the Deep South, celebrating the resilience of a people who had turned a once-overlooked weed into a beloved dish. What started as a survival food had become a community tradition, one passed down through generations. The careful preparation of pokeweed, taught by generations of African American cooks, is still followed today. It serves as a reminder of the deep botanical knowledge passed down through history, as well as the patience and skill required to transform a potentially dangerous plant into a nourishing, life-sustaining meal. Pokeweed greens are more than just a symbol of survival. They're a testament to the resilience, resourcefulness, and creativity that helped African American families endure the most difficult of times. This dish reminds us that through careful preparation, even the most humble and risky ingredients can become something vital and sustaining. Pokeweed greens carry the weight of history and knowledge, connecting us to a time when the land provided both sustenance and wisdom. Even now, as we continue to honor these traditions, pokeweed stands as a powerful reminder of the strength that can be found in the simplest of meals, a food that helped families through some of the hardest seasons in their lives. If these forgotten African American Christmas dishes warm your heart, share your favorite in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to keep these cherished memories alive and cooking for generations to come.